Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reading into Culture podcast. My name's Zara,
Hey, I'm Chris.
and we're here today with Owen. Hello, Owen.
Hi, Owen.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank
Good
you.
to hear.
Before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes, my name is Owen Stanford. I am from Spokane, Washington, born and raised, lived here my entire life. Uh, my writing journey probably began when I was really young, and I didn't really consider it like a writing journey, but I've always been like attracted to like stories and like creating like ideas for them. And like being able to take the thoughts in my head and put them into writing has always been like really fun for me. And so it was only like it wasn't until like I started going to college that I began like taking like actual writing classes where I could get those ideas down on paper or just type them out on a document. And it led me to like grad to an undergrad degree with a major in creative writing. So that was fun, and it wasn't until fairly recently, that I began like submitting my some of the pieces that I've written, whether from originating from those classes or just from just life in general, to like literary magazines such as Reading into Culture, and that's how I ended up here.
Amazing.
Do you write anything else rather than these nonfiction essays? Do you write any other genres?
Yes, I primarily write
Mm.
fiction. I'm trying to like work on like multiple novels and stories at once right
hmm
now. It's difficult, but some stuff is being written.
Nice.
Good stuff that remains to be seen, but it is something.
That is always the question, isn't it?
Yeah, you might enough just by law of averages. Eventually, if something will be good.
Yes, yes.
Oh.
Keep rolling the dice.
Exactly.
That's all we're doing.
Well then, would you like to introduce the piece for us?
Yes. My piece is called "Sniping: A Pop Culture Reference." It's a piece about the right and wrong way to make a pop culture reference, all through the metaphor of being a sniper.
Yeah, what made you and this is, don't feel free to say I don't know. But what made you want to write this piece? Is there any kind of particular desire, particular inspiration, particular moment, anything that kind of led to this piece's creation?
Well, yes, actually. The metaphor part of this piece, I don't know where that came from, and I'm probably going to have to go to therapy to figure it out. But uh, I probably thought about it at some point in like the past decade or so, or the past few years. But the real like starting point for this piece was the Stranger Things series finale. And like when that show ended, it got me thinking about like pop culture references and how like the era of like 80s pop culture references is now basically over, and like and how that show ending signaled it. And it got me thinking about like how like that show was often criticized for its overuse of pop culture references. And some might say that pop culture references in and of themselves are just inherently bad. And it got me thinking, well, no, I think there is a right way to make a pop culture reference.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's very interesting. Then I guess I would say, without further ado, should we hear the piece? If you wouldn't mind reading it aloud for us all.
Yeah. Let me take a drink of water first.
Of course, take all the time you need.
Okay. Pop culture references in the media we consume are not hard to come by these days. A cynic would argue that all these references are the logical endpoint to a self-cannibalizing culture, and while there is a kernel of truth in that statement, the whole situation is far more nuanced in my eyes. There is such a thing as a good pop culture reference. When a movie, TV show, book, etc. points to something outside of its own canon, either for humor or to make some larger point. When done well, it can be very effective. When done poorly, it can cause a lethal amount of eye rolls in the viewer or otherwise general cringe. My go-to example of a singular pop culture reference done badly comes from the novel The Help by Catherine Stockett. In a novel full of elements that could be considered offensive, the thing that offended me the most personally was when the main white lady Skeeter is driving back over the Lake Pontchartrain Bridge with the radio playing a band called the Rolling Stones. A tip for aspiring writers, especially one wanting to write historical fiction like The Help: Please don't do that. It will show everyone just how much of a hack you are. But if that's how a reference can be done badly, then how can a reference be done well? The way I see it, a writer writing in a pop culture reference into their story is a bit like a sniper perched up somewhere, patiently waiting to take out a target, viewing them with the scope of the gun, finger on the trigger, and preferably a silencer attached to the muzzle, like Bradley Cooper in American Sniper. The sniper with their finger on the trigger is the author of a book or the movie or show we're watching. The bullet firing out of the rifle is the reference itself, and the soon-to-be dead target is the audience. If a piece of media is LHO, then the audience is JFK. The thing about snipers is that all they really need is one shot. The bullets they use are so large and the speed at which they fire out of the gun is so fast, it doesn't require much else to successfully take out a target. If a sniper is patient, trained well, and aims right at the target in the right place at the right time, boom, target down. A good pop culture reference works the same way. It's a fundamental rule of comedy as well. Timing is everything. This is why many pop culture references are used for laughs. In Avengers Infinity War, just as an example, when Ebony Maw first arrives on Earth searching for the Infinity Stones, Tony Stark bluntly tells him to get lost, Squidward. This is a reference that hits it right on the target. Much like how a sniper may be taking part in an assassination attempt for any number of reasons, whether political, for revenge, or for a sense of duty to restore order in the world, he may also have been hired to carry out the assassination by a third party for their own convoluted reasons. There's a lot going on in this reference, more than meets the eye. For one, there's the surface level humor in that Ebony Maw does in fact look a bit like Squidward. Secondly, it is a little bizarre to hear someone like Iron Man reference a kids show, adding a hint of absurdity into this bit. It also implies a lot of things. It implies that in this universe of superheroes, aliens, gods, alternate dimensions, and even some magic, somehow SpongeBob SquarePants exists. Like I said, right on the target. Speaking of SpongeBob, another good reference can be found in the episode Graveyard Shift, where, after showing that the hash-slinging slasher that Squidward had been teasing SpongeBob about in order to frighten him as they worked the night shift was just a nervous guy looking to work at the Krusty Krab, it all makes perfect sense. That leaves them to wondering who was flickering the lights. Lights on cue start flickering again, and when they all turn to see who it is, it's revealed to be Count Orlok, a vampire from the 1922 German expressionist film Nosferatu, flipping the light switch up and down. The gang reacts to him with a chummy, humorous Nosferatu. The vampire smiles, and then the episode ends. This reference works mainly due to how random it is. For something to reference Nosferatu, especially a show directly aimed at children, it takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of guts to write that and put it out on television for everyone to see, unless you didn't have cable. Like, why would Count Orlok be in Bikini Bottom messing with SpongeBob and Squidward like that? Doesn't he have better things to do? Also, what kid would understand what this is referencing? Even an adult from the time this episode aired, 2002, would they be able to get the reference to a silent film from 80 years before? On paper, this reference shouldn't work. And yet, for some odd reason, it does, and it has since endured as one of the show's most iconic jokes. Direct hit. Much like how a successful hit by a sniper can inspire conspiracy theories about what actually happened, or discussions and debates about whether the assassination was even ethical, a good pop culture reference has layers. It makes you think about why the reference works, and what specifically causes it to work. However, much like a pop culture reference, a sniping attempt can go badly. You might just accidentally hit someone else, like when Moneypenny accidentally shot James Bond off a train in Skyfall. Or, not as directly bad as shooting an innocent bystander, but still not very good, the bullet might just whiz past your target and hit an inanimate object, giving away your position and cementing yourself as a failure of an assassin. The example from the help I gave earlier is one such bullet that totally misses the target. There's no creativity, no imagination, no curiosity to it. It's just the book going, hey, we're in the 60s, and the Rolling Stones were also in the 60s. Funny how that works, right? Sure, speaking in cold hard facts, the Rolling Stones did get their start around this time, so it makes sense that someone from the Deep South wouldn't have heard of them yet. But that's basically all there is to this reference. Pointing out the Stones were just getting their start at this time, like that's somehow clever. It's like when a comedian does a bad routine and then waits for the audience to react before going, see what I did there? If the Nosferatu SpongeBob reference is Lee Harvey Oswald, the Help Rolling Stones is John Hinckley Jr. But what do you do if you do miss? If you miss? If you only had the ability to take one shot, you would probably just cut your losses and move on. But if you are determined to take out the target, you can always try again. And even if you did hit the target, it may not have been enough to kill them. Maybe you got them in the arm or the leg or even the stomach, areas that will stop them in their tracks but aren't necessarily fatal. Sometimes a second bullet is required. And in fiction, you do have the ability to put in more than one pop culture reference and still be okay. Back in Avengers Infinity War, before the Squidward line, and when Tony and Stark and Bruce Banner reunite, Tony tells Bruce that the Avengers have broken up. Banner reacts with incredulity and confusion. Broke up? Like a band? Like the Beatles? To once again needlessly overanalyze a pop culture reference, because everyone loves it when someone does that. This one works because Bruce is essentially comparing a group of people who broke up for reasons concerning politics, violence, and betrayal to a rock band who broke up mainly for creative differences and just needing a break from each other. Now, while those two references in Infinity War work, they work in part because of how decently spaced they are between each other. They're a good spread apart, and in between them are other kinds of jokes and the actual story progressing. This is key. You shouldn't need to overload your story with pop culture references, much like how a sniper doesn't need to overload his target with bullets from his rifle. At that point, the sniper's cover would already have been blown, and everyone would think that they're just sloppy. Media with way too many references are like this. Think of something like Ready Player One or any episode of The Big Bang Theory. Works where the references aren't a bonus edition or a fun once in a while thing. They essentially are what they reference, with not a lot of other substance to them. No sauce under the cheese. If I listed every reference in Ready Player One, the list would be longer than the book and movie combined. And The Big Bang Theory doesn't so much celebrate nerd culture and references as it does utterly mock and ridicule them. Every goddamn reference the show does ends in an obnoxious laugh track, signaling the nerdiness should be mocked and ridiculed. Worse yet, projects like these and their references could potentially cause the viewer to just stop watching them. Because after all, why would you watch something that just references other works when you can just as easily watch the references themselves? But excessive violence can serve a purpose in some extreme instances. You ever wonder why, during hits or whacks carried out by the mob, they shoot a person so many times to the point where you have to pull up the Simpsons clip of a kid screaming, "Stop, stop, he's already dead"? It's to show that this is what happens if you ever do the mob wrong. Do you really want to end up with so many holes in you, like Sonny Corleone in The Godfather? They don't fuck with the mafia. The excessive violence has a point. It may be hard to do with a sniper rifle, but a Tommy gun? It can be done. An example of this in the pop culture sphere would be a show like Stranger Things. The show is often criticized for having way too many references to 1980s pop culture, to the point where it overtakes whatever substance the show has. And sometimes it does. But do the references serve a larger point? What is the show actually saying with these references? The media that the characters in Stranger Things consume, from Dungeons and Dragons to the music of The Clash and Kate Bush, among various other needle drops, to, because it's the 80s, obviously, Star Wars, is how they understand and come to terms with the frequently bizarre and disturbing world events around them. The monsters and villains from Dungeons and Dragons are the given names of the actual monsters plaguing Hawkins. Star Wars allows the kids to describe certain adult things or other inexplicable phenomenon they might not understand. Hopper's betrayal in season 1 being compared to Lando, Eleven's powers being compared to Yoda, and the songs often serve as an escape device from their characters to help them out of dire situations, whether at home, the clashes, should I stay or should I go, or from an actual nightmare dimension, Kate Bush's running up that hill, a deal with God. Can the references be a little cheesy, trite, and eye-rolly? Yes, they can. But I believe they come from a real place of love and sincerity for the past and the characters who reference them. And honestly, it's a real thing people do. Consuming media is often a way to both escape and understand the ever-increasing cruel world around us. Stranger Things is just the idea pushed to an extreme point. I'll take it any day over other works whose references seem to only serve for cheap laughs and causing the viewer to reenact the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme. There are other metaphors and analogies I could make comparing the art of making a pop culture reference to the act of sniping. For example, if a work seems to reference its past self in a less than sincere way, anything Disney farts out these days, it would be the equivalent of a sniper turning the rifle on themselves and blowing their brains out. But since that's kind of gross and depressing, I won't talk about it. I think I've said enough. Hopefully you get what I'm trying to say. Making a pop culture references and making it well takes a lot of work, more than seems apparent, much like how sniping takes a lot of work. There is one key difference between making a pop culture reference and sniping, though. If you make a pop culture reference badly, you'll be made fun of, endlessly ridiculed online for years to come. If you fail at assassinating someone, I don't think people will even remember your name, let alone what you did. However, just like making a pop culture reference in a way that's good, if you succeed at hitting your target, you may just go down in the history books.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was very well read. That really added to the humor.
Totally, very, very funnily read. I've always loved hearing the writers read the pieces. It really brings them alive. It really it's really such a privilege to hear. I think always. So thank you. I guess I would start with my question. There's a lot of conversation about what makes a pop culture reference good, what makes a pop culture reference bad, and that's very good and interesting. I wonder what to you is kind of in a more general sense. Why do it? Why? What are the strengths of it as a kind of as a technique, I suppose, and what are the weaknesses in a more general sense? Or can that question not be generally answered?
Well, references are like as to other things are like as old as like the written word itself, and like they're like an actual like device used to things. But like pop culture references are still relatively new because of like what pop culture is and how recent it is. I think there is just like the inherent like this is like human anatomy, just like the acknowledgement of like something else that we recognize and just like clicks in us, and we just go, I know what that is.
Totally.
There is
You mentioned
that.
the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing
Yeah,
at me.
exactly.
Totally.
Like human brains are just kind of wired to like do that. So there's like the surface level at least, but then there's also like when you like peel back like the layers, like what a reference is actually doing and like what it's actually saying, like those kinds of references. So there's the surface level stuff, and there's also like the deep stuff.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So for you, it's kind of there's a kind of psychological satisfaction to
yes,
something familiar being mentioned. Yeah, okay, I totally agree with that. Yeah, that's very true.
Get that. Do you think that like a reference? Do you think it has to work without understanding the reference, or do you think references should be so universal that everybody understands it? Like, what do you think about references where you might not even understand what this is referencing? Because Squidward, everybody kind of knows that.
Yeah,
but everybody doesn't know Nosferatu.
yeah, like well, I talked about that. The absurdity of like, would anyone understand Nosferatu is in itself kind of funny. But like, I think there might always be someone who will get the reference just because there are so many people in the world and with so many different experiences. And like there is like an unintended side effect of like those references. It might like cause someone to like go out and like actually look up what Nosferatu is, and like not only may they learn something cool, but they'll get the reference, and maybe they won't even understand it. It'll just make it even more absurd, but that might make it funnier.
Totally.
That's true, yeah.
No, I think that's really because a lot of the kind of the examples you use in this piece are like film or television, or maybe all of them. No, they're not. Obviously, there's the help, and there's but yeah. I think that's really interesting because like coming at it from the literary perspective, literature as an art form is very, very referential, kind of, and we have a lot of respect for the long history of literature. Like if we supposed to study literature, you learn about medieval people, and film and television as a bit of an outsider to that kind of space. It seems it has a much shorter memory. There's kind of, it would be rare. Like Nosferatu is a peculiarly old reference, and that's only 100 years old. Obviously, it's not existed for that long as technology, and also a major factor would, I guess, be that it's much harder to preserve and much less well preserved. Like these old films, there's a lot of them are kind of lost or these kind of things. But I guess references are also a way of kind of keeping that history alive. Kind of, as you said, like people are gonna go look up what Nosferatu is right now. After that SpongeBob joke, and that's a kind of a way for an art form to kind of preserve its own history, and And I find that such a strength of references. I don't know. What would your thoughts be about that?
I think that's beautiful. Like a throwaway gag at the end of an episode that makes it kind of seem like they were running out of time for a joke is like preserving art and cinema.
Yeah, I'm also kind of thinking about, because you mentioned Avengers. I think, I don't know if it's in Avengers Infinity War or in Endgame, but where Spider-Man kind of is like, oh, this is like these old movies like Alien or something, and it's that I think works really well as well, because it just kind of characterizes this person as like really young, and then it's like all the older people watching will be like, what old films? It kind of works really well there too.
Yeah, totally. And like, nobody would call a book from the 90s an old book, you know? So yeah, it's interesting.
Good joke. I what stuck out to me at this time, which I actually hadn't noticed before, is in the very beginning of the essay you call our culture self-cannibalizing, and kind of most of film especially is very, it's all sequels, seemingly it's all remakes, it's all kind of adaptations of adaptations, and so that, I don't know, what do you think about this kind of can you expand on that, on the self-cannibalizing nature of our culture?
Well, self-cannibalization is like a really extreme term to describe this, but I get it does make sense because of all like the remakes and remakes and sequels and adaptations. But at the same time, there's that part of me that wants to remind people of the adage that there are only seven stories and we're all telling different variations of it. And also, nothing is inherently original. It all has to like come from something. Like true original films or novels or books or TV shows came when the medium was just starting out. And we've been like only just like referencing those works as we may try to come up with our own original works. So nothing is inherently original. That's not really a nice thing to hear, but I think it can be taken nicely because like, hey, art can never truly be destroyed. Art can only just be carried on forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother actually always says, like, how can they keep coming up with songs? How have not all songs been written already? How can they keep coming up with films? And you can kind of see it in that way too, that it is actually remarkable that we are still coming up with things, new combinations of things, rather than everything's unoriginal. And I don't know, you call it cynical. It is kind of cynical to say, kind of people were more creative in the past, I guess, is what that implies, that now it's all remakes now. But maybe it is also because there hasn't been that many new fundamental technologies like film have that have been invented. And so, or in music as well, it's kind of, since a certain point in maybe the 80s or something, most of the technology in music has kind of pretty much remained the same. So I guess there's less space to experiment with these things. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think like kind of the kind of nature of the cultural economy is much more focused on kind of IPs and the kind of maintaining of an IP, and is much less prone to taking risks on.
What do you mean by IP?
Intellectual property, so like Star Wars or like a kind of a franchise. Much more prone to that than it used to be, and much less willing to take a risk on a story that isn't already in one of these universes. I do think that's true. Even like Stranger Things is pretty like relies heavily on Dungeons and Dragons and these kind of things. There's still like everything is referential and nothing is original, but that doesn't make everything equally unoriginal, if that makes sense to me. Like some things are certainly more original than other things, even if nothing is original, capital O. I don't know. I guess how I think about it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, and do you think that culture is becoming less original with time?
Kinda. I mean, yes, it is. Like we're at the point where
Mm.
we are getting all a bunch of things in sequels, but there is like this tendency to like treat the past as like perfect
Mm.
and like with a total originality, and that's not true at all. Like even like for example, the like the hmm, like the biggest movies of the 80s, like Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Superman, those were all based off of something. Like Star
Mm.
Wars, like it started in the 70s, but like Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, those were sequels. And
Yeah.
like Indiana Jones is like based on old adventure novels. So that's not really an original work. And Superman is based off comic books. But then there's also like I just there's this thing called survivorship bias. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
where you like when you try to like remember the past and like how great it was, you're only looking at the good stuff that has stood the test of time. You're not looking at the stuff that hasn't stood the test of time. So like me, there was probably like a lot of garbage back then and like a lot of
Totally.
unoriginal garbage back then, but no one remembers it because everyone remembers all the good stuff that happened.
Mm.
Totally.
That's a very good point.
No, that's very true. It's very true. And even before that in Hollywood, it was like very kind of, we look at the kind of 40s, 50s Hollywood, 60s Hollywood, very based on musicals, on converting musicals to film. It's also not exactly a kind of original storytelling. Like Gone with the Wind,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you mentioned the Avengers, the other kind of film of that kind of financial success would be Gone with the Wind, and that's a, just, you know, that's a novel, and then there's like lots of it. It's not certainly not. There was some time where there was a whole bunch of original stories being made. Hollywood has always kind of relied heavily on novels and musicals and that kind of comic books more recently, I suppose. Uh, so that's very true. Um,
It strikes me as well that so many films nowadays are original or are, you know, not sequels or of the same universe. They're very often book adaptations. Um, so there seems to be something in the kind of in the written word that kind of allows that gives space to originality in some way. Maybe it has also something to do with the fact that film is a very collaborative art
Mm-hmm.
form, which is often very good, and writing is more of a solitary art form.
mm,
I don't know. That's just kind of a thought thrown into the room. Or
mm,
if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. Film is definitely more collaborative. So like you could like have someone like come up to you and say, "Hey, why don't we reference this in the movie?" And but when you're writing, it's like I can reference whatever the heck I want, and no one's gonna tell me otherwise.
Mm,
yeah. I guess also like the books are much cheaper than films to make, so you can they make much more books than they do films, and you can kind of afford to appeal to a very niche audience in books in a way that films kind of can't because they're so expensive. Maybe is one idea that maybe is true. Like whereas films kind of either need to be very small indie films or they need to be
Yeah,
cost $10 billion. You
mm,
yeah.
know, it's kind of, whereas a book can just kind of, here's a book. You know, obviously there's cost involved, but you can afford to take a risk in a way that you can't with a film.
yeah.
One bad film and your studio is,
Yeah,
you know, in trouble financially. It's not the same with a one bad book for a publisher
yeah.
at all.
There was like an era of like mid-budget movies that were somewhat
Mm,
original. They didn't cost like $10 million or $100 million. They cost like right in the middle, like 40 to 50 million
yeah.
dollars. And a lot of those movies were original. They were still based off
Mm,
of stuff, but they're more original than like a multi-billion dollar franchise that we have
yeah.
nowadays. So, and I think like it wasn't. It's not until like recently that those types of movies like started to come back. But some
Mm,
of them haven't been doing well like financially, so maybe like the resurgence of that will be short lived.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame because it's true. Films, especially with a huge budget, they have to kind of make a lot of money just to kind of pay the cost of what it costs to make. And so they have to kind of appeal to a larger
Mm-hmm.
audience. So they have to be kind of safe in that way. But I feel like we're kind of now more talking about the culture, like culture being self-cannibalizing, which is obviously I brought that up, but to kind of gently
Yeah.
push it back towards pop culture references.
mm,
Um, it seems like most pop culture references, or at least good examples of pop culture references, seem humorous
mm.
um, and seem comedic. And I wonder if you think that a pop culture reference can kind of take itself seriously, or maybe even be kind of a dramatic device.
I definitely think so. I There are plenty of examples of that. Like this is like Dante's Inferno, for example. Would that have pop culture references? I know the joke of that book is like it's the first fan fiction, but also it does like it has a lot of references to like biblical stuff and like the people of
Yeah,
the time, and but it's not played for laughs at all. It's very serious.
yeah.
And like in terms of like a film example, there's a movie called The Florida Project, which I really like. It's by Sean Baker, and like there are a lot of references to like Peter Pan and like,
Mm,
or well, not like Peter Pan, but like, oh, Pinocchio, like
Mm,
they're like names of like Pinocchio characters graffitied on the wall. There's like a creepy
mm,
old guy whose last name is Coachman, and Coachman is a character from Pinocchio, and it all like has to do with
mm,
like the kids of the movie being like taken from like their safe place and going to a dangerous place, having to like go to having to like be having to like learn to come to terms with the ugly world that they live in. So that would be an
mm.
example of like a very serious pop culture reference.
Yeah, yeah, almost like an extended kind of reference. Yeah,
Mm.
that's really interesting.
yeah. I think I want to maybe pick up on the specific example of Stranger Things, because Stranger Things does have a lot of references, and I really like Stranger Things, and I think one thing that works is kind of it's real. It feels real to me. Obviously, I wasn't there in the 80s, but like if you were a bunch of kids in the 80s, you would use the culture in which you live to understand the world, right? And so it doesn't feel like a kind of, oh look, this thing, but much more like these are just people trying to understand the world, and they're using the culture in which they exist to do that. Whereas in The Help, that example is not, it's not somebody using the culture in which they exist to understand the world. I don't know, and certainly not in The Big Bang Theory either. And I don't know, like maybe that's not like a, there's maybe some kind of something to be said that the difference between like a reference within a historical context and then a reference that kind of is less historically grounded, if that makes sense. Like they reference 80s things because it's the 80s, whereas the Big Bang Theory reference nerd stuff because they're nerds. That's because there seems to be like a kind of a difference there somehow. I don't know. I don't
Uh, hmm. Yeah, yeah.
know.
The Big Bang Theory is. I would. I haven't really watched much of it, but I would
Mm,
consider it to be like sort of like a very insincere kind of referencing, and like because
mm,
these are like grown men and they reference like nerd stuff, and all like the nerd stuff is like played for laughs, and they're supposed to be like mocked because like why would someone grown up and like having to like get married be interested in like DC or the Flash or something. And like that's always like it's a punchline. But with Stranger Things, like
Mm,
the main majority
mm.
of the cast were kids. And like
Yeah, yeah.
kids like they like grab on to like media they watch and like use it to like apply it to like
Totally.
reality. And while that's maybe not the best thing, that's how most of us grow up. Like we
Totally.
watch stuff, we read stuff, we play stuff, and we try our best if we can like apply it to like the world we live in. That's why like lessons and stories are so important.
Totally.
Morals.
Mm.
Totally. I think,
That's such an interesting point.
yeah,
That kids have kind of a special connection to pop culture, and a more intimate connection to pop culture, and so that's why it kind of works when it's children. That's a really good point.
that is interesting. But I think that's true that kind of referencing existing stories, existing culture is how we understand things. That's kind of what you do in this essay. Like, in a way, it's kind of the kind of cultural, pop cultural even, an image of the assassin of Lee Harvey Oswald is kind of the way you kind of explore that idea to understand a separate concept. And I guess to me, that's something I would like to explore. Like, this essay itself contains a lot of references, is a very referential piece of writing, a lot of pop culture references specifically. And was that a deliberate decision to kind of practice what you preach, or was it just a kind of, that's just kind of the way you think about things? Or I don't know, I just kind of talk to me about
Yes,
that.
and yes, and yes. I think that's how most people think nowadays, with how like much
Mm-hmm.
pop culture is ingrained into our heads and how difficult
Totally.
is it is for us to
Mm-hmm.
shake it. But also, like as I wrote, I was like, I think it's probably a smart idea if I put in a bunch of pop culture references in this piece about pop culture references.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
like, but I didn't just go like pop culture. I did like historical references, like Lee Harvey Oswald, John
Yeah.
Hinckley Jr.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's interesting. So would you consider, that's a very good question. Is the assassination of JFK pop culture? Because it kind of
Hmm.
is, but it's certainly like a very iconic part of our cultural
Hmm.
history, even in
Yeah.
Europe, and I imagine even more so in America. But like, I don't know, like some things that definitely are pop
Yeah.
culture, right? Even though they're like real events.
Yeah.
Like, let me think of a good example. I don't know, it's loads of stuff. Help me out here.
I don't
uh,
know. The moon
Moon
landing.
the moon
landing.
landing, or that meme of Obama like giving a medal to Joe
Yeah.
Biden, like that really happened, but it's also part of pop
Yes.
culture, right? And is the assassination of JFK, like, is it like
Hmm.
that, or is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, for one, that was a fear I had with this piece was, does this put me on some government watch list because of all the references to assassination that I bring up? Uh, but like the thing is like pop culture and just history and culture in general are like so intertwined nowadays. Like it's kind of
Mm,
impossible to separate one from each other. Like I don't think the Abraham Lincoln assassination is history because it's so far in the
mm,
past, but also with JFK there was video footage of his
yeah.
assassination, and that
Mm.
was
Mm-hmm.
super huge in like cementing itself in popular
Mm-hmm.
culture because we have real actual like imagery of like what was happening at that time. The Zapruder film.
Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of we watched Mad Men a few months ago, and there are a lot of kind of references, or it kind of goes through the '60s, and it actually discusses political things that go on, but then also kind of cultural figures, and there's not actually or just generally the kind of the culture in a larger sense, and that to me it doesn't really feel different from each other if it's kind of like oh, let's go to a Bob Dylan concert, or if it's
Mm.
the president was shot. Like they both feel like kind of, look, this is what happened in the
Mm.
60s, even though one is more kind of, it's music, and one is politics, but they both feel like pop culture.
Yes. Pop culture is a really nebulous term. It can mean like
Mm.
Mm.
anything basically. and but because it's popular culture, so it's culture that's
Yeah.
everyone knows and it's really well known and it's popular. And the JFK assassination or a Bob Dylan concert could be base if we take pop culture to mean that they're basically on the same level.
Mm.
So it's a difficult
Totally.
thing to define, and anything huge could be considered pop culture, especially nowadays with how like history and like culture are like so intertwined.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that's very interesting. Like, it's the images of the JFK assassination that make it pop culture. Whereas the Abraham Lincoln assassination, because we don't have the video of that, it's history. I think that's so true. I think that's kind of, I don't know, that's so true. That's kind of how the image changes it, how recording it, how they're kind of making it a spectacle, makes it culture
Mhm.
somehow. I don't know. I totally agree with that. So that's not a very good question, but it's a good point.
Mhm.
I wanted to say good point.
I have a question about not necessarily the content of this essay, but more the form. So there's it has a very colloquial tone, and it also has just jokes in
Mhm.
it. Like, unless you didn't have cable, it's kind of, you're talking directly to the reader, and you say, I think you get what I mean, or let me analyze this more, because everybody loves when you do that, and these kinds of things. So it's a little bit meta, I
Mhm.
guess, is what I'm trying to say. Talk me through that decision of kind of writing
Yeah.
in this way.
I always try to inject humor into what I write, unless it's like something really serious, in which case I like try to do it with less humor, but still add some like kind of levity to it. So like, and I do
Mm.
want to get across like I'm just having like a conversation with someone. It feels nice and it feels nice to write.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, it kind of changes it from, and also this kind of central metaphor, and all of the own references that you kind of talk about. It kind of changes it from kind of serious analysis, to kind of, I'm just kind of working through an idea here, come along for the ride. And obviously it also kind of adds an element of entertainment, just on a very basic kind of simple level. It makes it more fun to read, or to hear you read it out. Do you have any kind of inspirations or any influences when it comes to your nonfiction, and also when it comes to this style of writing?
Well, yeah, I watch a lot of video essays on YouTube. So like, and
I was thinking that it was feeling like a video essay when you
yes,
read it.
exactly, yes, exactly. And those have like a very like parasocial vibe to it. Like I'm just chatting along with a friend and he's explaining something to me. But I've been really inspired by like authors like Chuck Klosterman who are like pop culture like connoisseurs who like can analyze basically anything and make it sound interesting. Uh, yeah. My other favorite nonfiction writer is Patrick Radden Keefe, but he didn't really influence this at all. I still love his writing, but he didn't really like come to. I just want to point that out. He didn't really influence this at all because his writing is very different than from what I wrote.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
So I have another question, which is um, more generally about writing, especially nonfiction. Um, how does writing about an idea? You said you had this idea, that a pop culture reference is like a sniper, um, a while ago. How does it change? How does that idea change when you actually write about it? And this is a relatively long piece as well, so you have to kind of actually understand yourself, or maybe at the end of writing you understand your idea more than you did in the beginning. um, how does the idea change after the process of writing about it?
Hmm. Well, definitely when I was writing, I like came up with like way more ideas and like metaphors for this analogy of like a sniper being like a pop culture reference. Like, and I even thought of like more examples of like pop culture reference on the fly, like that, like the when I wrote like that Avengers reference being Squidward, and that made me think of SpongeBob, and that made me think of the Nosferatu reference and how that was actually awesome. But like, it's a really cool feeling when you're like writing and you realize, oh, this analogy actually makes some sense, and like for like I as I thought, I was like, oh, like a sniper missing could be like a bad reference that doesn't work and isn't funny or clever or anything. And like a sniper like overloading an adversary with bullets could be like a piece that has like way too many references and no substance underneath it, like Ready Player One or Big Bang Theory. But like also sometimes an overzealous violence can serve a point, like in Stranger Things.
Mm. Did you ever start to kind of doubt your idea or the metaphor, or maybe not doubt it entirely, but kind of see the limits of it while writing?
Yeah, and I think that's a problem with like most metaphors, like most analogies that are trying to be like tongue in cheek and like cool and like clever. At a certain point, you're gonna stop coming up with like cool things to reference, and like you're just going to have to like either change it or just keep going. But
Mm.
with this, I never came to that point because like I don't think I really ever came to that point because everything just for some reason just made sense.
That's good. That's good when that happens. Shall we ask our final question?
Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, Owen, in light of everything that we've talked about and everything else that you think about the world, what do you think the place of writing is in the culture and in society at the moment?
Well, as I'm sure you can gather, world and culture isn't in the best place right now. Things are pretty chaotic and hectic and uncertain, especially with like AI like coming in to like take over most writing gigs. But the pessimist in me wants to like double down in like despair and like there's no hope and we should just give up. But the optimist in me says like maybe this like whole thing of like AI coming for writing will inspire like others to take up writing themselves, other humans to go writing and create like new things with like things that like really hit home something in someone, like real emotions, real feelings, real actual work put into something people care about. Maybe that will happen. I don't know. I'm not an expert on things, but I think people are inherently smart and they will realize that like maybe I can actually do something about this whole thing and like actually, even if it's small, even if it is writing something, whether it be like a novel or a script or just or a video essay or whatever, if I made it on my terms and I put everything I can into it, maybe I can make the world, even if it's really small, a better place.
It's interesting you were saying how we were talking before about how like there's not been a kind of technological developments in
Mm-hmm.
music or film or writing, and kind of AI is that technological
Yeah.
development.
Yeah.
Like obviously very scary and unsettling, but also a very interesting and powerful technology, and like maybe it will lead to some kind of, or maybe it already has, like to some kind of creative change in the culture somehow,
Mm-hmm.
like the photography or film or the synthesizer or whatever. I don't know. So I think there's also reason to be kind of there's a silver lining maybe to
Yeah.
AI perhaps. I don't know. Um,
I think it's best
Yeah,
to
it
be
makes sense.
somewhere in the middle right now between optimistic and pessimistic.
I
Don't
agree.
be
I
too
agree.
optimistic. Don't be too pessimistic. Just be right here.
I agree with I agree. There's a lot of kind of extreme opinions about AI. I do agree with that.
What do you think more generally, not just about AI, but just generally about the kind of the purpose of writing, on one side for the person who writes it for themselves, but then also for the kind of wider culture. What does that do?
There are multiple things that writing can do. Writing can like just satisfy you. Think there's the inherent satisfaction that many people get from just putting their thoughts on paper, but also there's also like if you write for other people, you are writing to either entertain or inform them or like challenge them, like show them like there are other things in the world besides what you might see just from your eyes, and you might actually like get a better view of the world just from seeing someone write about something that you never really considered.
Well, I think that's interesting because we've obviously published poetry, fiction, and non-fiction. Maybe my question is: there any kind of what do you see the role of non-fiction writing or kind of essay writing, particularly as
Nonfiction writing, I think is really important. It because it can teach people about like something, like I said, something they didn't consider, or it can help them like understand something about like an uncertain and chaotic world, whether it be like a news report or just like a fun essay, or it could just basically entertain them, like if it's on something fun like pop culture references or a video game or an anime or whatever. If it entertains and while being interesting, I think it's a successful piece of nonfiction.
Very interesting.
Well then, I guess if there's nothing more to say, we'll obviously there's much more to say, but if there's nothing more that we have to say, because we've only mortals with so many thoughts, I guess we'll wrap it up. So I'll say thank you very much for watching. I think this has been a really great chat. Thank you so much, Owen, for being such a wonderful guest and
You got it.
sending us a piece. It's a really interesting, funny piece. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to publish it. And if you want to read Owen's piece, which you definitely should, if you have any taste at all, you can read it on readingintoculture.com. And we'll have a new episode every Sunday of the podcast. And yeah, that's it. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.